Hey, welcome to the Live Well presented by Rapala. That is Ronnie Moore. I'm Tommy Sanders, and we are here to continue getting you ready for the second half of the Florida Swing here. We are going to the St. Johns River down in Florida, very often a starting point in the season for the Bassmaster Elite Series. But just like Harris Chain, the last week, we are going here in April, 2 months later generally than when we usually are at the St. Johns River.
And normally when we're in the February month time frame at the St. Johns, it is so weather dependent. We've almost broke 100 pounds there because it was really cold, and then we had a good warming trend, and it kind of all those different elements collided for a big bass bonanza. But in April, much more consistent weather. I'd expect that the fishing actually would be an uptick at the St. Johns River. I think there's a lot more things in play when you do that. You can go to Rodman, maybe fish in that deeper water area around some timber. We're gonna definitely have people who are utilizing forward-facing sonar in that area. The river could definitely shine a little bit more. All those turns and bends where the shell gathers, we could see anglers use their electronics for that as well. But this is still one of the best fishing rivers there is in the country. Whether it's lily pads, maybe shoreline grass, hopefully there is a more emergent vegetation coming. I know that's been a big effort from the people of the St. Johns region the last couple years. So if there's some extra grass in there, lily pads, those canals aren't just used for spawners, they're used for resident fish. I think we can see the field spread out a little bit and be able to fish and get bites. Not where, oh, it's a cold front, I'm gonna have to slow down and pick apart this one lily pad for 3 hours. Not the case. I think that we're gonna see a lot of anglers being able to fish, do a lot of things. Don't forget about crescent. We haven't seen crescent factor too much, but we always have 1 or 2 guys in the top 10 on the final day that have sampled from it. It could be a factor with it being April. That's the one big thing as well.
Going to be the 24th Bassmaster event here, and of course, 310 miles long. As we look at the map, the main river in the state of Florida goes from south to north, and of course, you've got Palatka closer to the north end of it. You take a left out of Palatka, and you go all the way to Jacksonville. It gets wide, very big. Down to the south is, of course, Lake George, which so much of the big tournament action has been in that area. It goes further down to, of course, Rodman, you mentioned, past it before you get to Lake George, Woodruff and Dexter, the lakes down south there. So a lot of travel is possible. How much do you want to bite off at this tournament?
What's crazy is we have seen almost to Jacksonville factor for a victory for Paul Mueller, and we've seen Gary Klaus be successful about his running out of water. He was so shallow and far south. And everywhere in between, we've seen John Cruz manage the Rodman and St. John's aspect of using both for his game plan as well. Bryan knew right at the bottom of the lake, right there at Lake George. I think that we're going to see a good mixture of all of those things, but this is one of the best rivers when it comes to fishing. Like we mentioned the Mississippi, and you think of the Red River in certain aspects of it, and then you think about the St. Johns River, such a great place. I don't know if the tide, we always think about the tide, it's going to be a factor, it's not going to be a factor. It's so subtle and slight there that I think it's more so effective when it is colder. I think it's more of a worry. But with these fish actively moving when the water's warmer, these fish are going to be on the move anyways. They're not just going to be sitting still and moving as the tide takes them in and out, but rather they're going to be moving because they are on the feed up. Most of these fish will probably be post-spawn. But Tommy, we're always trying to force it. In that February time period, they're spawning down at Okeechobee good, probably in January and February. Harris Chain, St. Johns River, you're in the top, you're north. You're almost making the turn in the panhandle there. You're so far north.
You could be a couple of weeks or more.
Yes, for sure. And I think that we push it and say it's a spawn fest, it's a spawn fest. I think that they've had waves of spawn, but we could see more spawning fish maybe at the St. John's than we did, at the Harris Chain the week prior. So it's going to be an interesting event, but it's one of those historic places. You talked about how many times we've been other levels of bass competition at the Harris Chain. We have been here so many times. One of the most visited places, the St. John's, but it's always thrown us for a loop the last 5 years. I think this is another loop that we get to learn for the first time.
Yeah, absolutely. There'll be so many stories, as you just mentioned, working down there. Another one is the case of one Rick Clunn. Rick Clunn, if you'll recall, 40 years after he won his first Classic, he goes to the St. Johns River and wins the tournament in 2016, and the next time the tournament is held there in 2019, he wins again. Just incredible story, and we'll be shadowing him all week long as well, and that'll be fun to watch.
100%, because you had mentioned it, Rick Clunn is going to be his 500th B.A.S.S. event. Absolutely incredible that man has fished for 50 years, spanning 5 decades, something that no other competitor in any professional professional sport can say they've done is compete. You want to talk about the types of boats, baits, and techniques that were factoring when he first started versus now, and that he's still desiring to learn the new technology and adapt and learn his ways. He always mentions that you can't prove that you're the best unless you've fished all types of possibilities and in all regulations, and he is actually one of the only people in the world to have ever done that. So kudos to Rick Clunn. Like you said, I believe we're going to have him on Bassmaster Live every day that he allows us of competition. Hopefully he's fishing all 4 days as well. Wouldn't that be something, Tommy? If he wins again at the St. John's and it's his 500, I don't think I'm going to let him go and fish at Murray for his 501st B.A.S. event. If he can end on 500 and a win, I think that's like,
I think
you can't write
eclipse would be triggered.
Yeah, I think you can't
Yeah.
write it much better. But very, very cool, and it'll be a great tribute to one of the pioneers. He's been the bridge between all the generations, from Dance and Martin to Nixon, and then bridging to the Van Dams and the Browers of the world, and then now bridging to the Trey McKinney's, 19 years old.
We always brag about that. Our sport, though it may be over half a century old, is still one where you can see some of the original stars, see them in action. And we will see that at the Maxam Tire Bassmaster Elite Palatka, April 18th through the 21st. Of course, all the coverage here on Bassmaster.com and FS1 on the weekends. And that is the Live Well presented by Rapala.